Welcome to another edition of Whiskey, Games, and Nerd Stuff. Today's whiskey is actually going to be some coffee. It's KAUAI Coffee, if I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, please let me know. Let's go ahead and take a sip. Gotta have my coffee in the morning. And today's Nerd Stuff is actually going to be an interesting talk about Unmask Alice. It's a book by Rick Emerson. It's Unmask Alice, LSD, Satanic Panic, and the imposter behind the world's most notorious diaries. How this came about is I had been watching Hysteria on Peacock. Hysteria is a horror drama with Bruce Campbell. Highly, highly recommend it. It was really good. And I had been talking to a friend about it, and she had just been happened to reading this book, Unmask Alice. And because Satanic Panic and Hysteria and all that is part of what Hysteria is about, it led into the conversation about the Satanic Panic, which led into the conversation about this book, and she recommended I read it. For those that aren't familiar, in the late 70s and 80s, there was, what they called Satanic Panic, where, people definitely overreacted about Dungeons and Dragons and satanic influence in music and movies and comics and all that, and a lot of parents just freaked out. And where Hysteria, one of the things with Hysteria with Bruce Campbell, again on Peacock, the premise is around a struggling heavy metal band and some high schoolers, that some events happen, and then they try and use those events to basically generate some PR around the Satanic Panic. I really, really like the show. I would highly recommend it. Definitely get past that first episode, and it picks up. It goes places that you don't think. And I believe if you go and kind of think about it, there's a lot more to some of those episodes than I think people realize. There's a lot of social commentary in there that if you sit and think about it, where people are overreacting and freaking out, how mass panic causes stuff. And I think you can see some parallels to that in today's society, especially in the political climate, no matter what side, the left or right, middle that you're on. I think there is some stuff in there that has some definite parallels between the Satanic Panic and Hysteria around different events in the 70s and 80s. So for those that aren't familiar, Unmask Alice kind of goes in and talks about some diaries that were written in the 70s and 80s, if I remember right. There was a diary called KAUAI Alice, and then there was some other ones that came about that where, as I'm reading this, and allegedly whatever verbiage we need to say, I believe this was kind of came out to be held true, but it was there KAUAI Alice, and there was Jay's Journal. This individual, Patrice Sparks, had written these diaries, which a lot of people believe and will point to as one of the things that perpetuated the Satanic Panic and all this stuff that happened. Later on, come to find out, this book, Unmask Alice, is this, it's the true story of what happened, where this came about, that these journals from back then weren't exactly true. And as you can see on some of the blurbs on the back of the book, this one right here was kind of interesting, I thought, was fascinating. Emerson skillfully, incredibly links Patrice Sparks' stubborn ambition to become recognized as an author to destruction of lives in a period of satanic worship hysteria. I have not started reading this book yet. Again, she had recommended to read this, and I'm definitely going to read it. It's definitely interesting. I had forgotten some of this stuff of this individual and kind of what sparked it, but I do think it's a good book. I know that there's a lot of YouTube videos out there on this book. If you're not familiar with Unmask Alice and what it's about and kind of what happened in the 70s, 80s, I would recommend you just kind of Google or on the YouTube search algorithm, just type in the book, listen for about 15, 20 minutes about the book, about what Patrice did, and all these things that came about. It's definitely interesting in here. This is a book that I'm going to read, and I'm sure I'm going to end up talking about it a little bit more once I finish this. Just like any of the other books I read, I'll usually do a quick little video on this and then talk about it more later. But I just wanted to do a quick 5-minute video on this. And until next time, folks, cheers.